Hello, I'm Andrew Drought and I'm Senior Teacher at the British Council in Japan. Today I'd like to share with you how the team in Japan used its experience of teaching online during the COVID pandemic to better integrate outcomes, assessment and delivery, and how we used that learning upon our return to the bricks and mortar classroom to improve outcomes by taking a comprehensive learning systems approach. Now, you would have seen from my abstract that's about the program and about the problems that we encountered with the program, and how today I'd want to primarily talk about how we actually what we actually did and the effect of that. So very quickly, as I said, this is all in the abstract. This is some information about the program and the context and the type of students and the type of course. A little bit more details about the syllabus, how that was designed, the approach to learning assessment taken in the classroom and why. And then the problems, as I said in the abstract, about there not being enough challenge, students not spending enough time communicating in English, students not feeling they were making enough progress, possibly because lessons have become too activity heavy, not enough time for communicating in English and receiving feedback, and also possibly because of a mismatch developing between the outcomes and the assessments and the delivery. So what were the solutions? Well, this solutions that I'm going to outline came from our experience teaching online. Because of COVID, we had to move our program. Not all universities, but most of them, we had to move the program online for nearly 3 years actually, and we found that, as I'm sure a lot of you yourselves found, that there just seemed less time in the online lessons to do things. You couldn't cover as much in an online lesson, so we found that we were being quite being quite generous with our cuts to material to reduce the amount of we were trying to cover in class, and that's what we carried on into the face-to-face classroom after the online experience finished, which wasn't that long ago. So what did we do? First of all, we moved most of the receptive skills and language work that we used to do to homework, and posted the instructions for that onto the online learning system that we used with the university, and used that extra time to take a simpler task-based learning approach in the classroom. And this was done to optimize the time on task and spend more time doing the speaking task, for example, giving the students more sense of challenge because they were engaged in an effort to cope with communication, to complete these tasks, and this was hoped would increase student engagement as well, because the students were communicating, which is enjoyable. They're sharing their ideas. They're doing something more interesting, and also the other reason was to give more opportunities for students to self-assess, to get peer feedback, teacher feedback, to improve that sense of progress. So this is an example of one of the simplified lessons that I'd mentioned, just to show you how we adapted one unit of the Unlock textbook to take that simpler task-based learning approach. So this unit was on the theme of economics, and the final outcome or task for the unit was to take part in a discussion about whether young people should have credit cards or not. So begin with a warm-up to introduce the topic, get students thinking about the topic. Notice we've got this useful language box you'll see appearing throughout the materials, just to give that extra bit of scaffolding to learners, for the lower level learners, the less confident learners. And of course, we share with the learners the aim or outcome. And this, as I said, this one is to take part in a discussion about whether young people should be allowed to have credit cards. Share the success criteria, but in the first lesson, we just ask the learners what they think they will need to do this well. Later on in the unit, of course, we will share the success criteria so they know what they need to do exactly to do the outcome, the learning outcome well. This slide just shows an outline of activities that we're doing in the class, just so students and teachers alike are clear what's going to happen in the lesson, to create some interest, to make sure everyone understands why they're doing things. And what we did as part of this simpler task-based learning approach was move the speaking task to the very beginning of the unit, because we used to leave, as in the textbook, we used to leave the final speaking task or writing task right till the end of the unit. But we put it to the very beginning of the unit, and then repeated it throughout the unit, so that learners get a chance to repeat the task and get feedback and use that feedback, and also to do the task right at the beginning makes it clearer to the learners what they're doing in this unit and why they're doing it. And also we can give the class the opportunity to look back later in the unit to how they performed the task at the very beginning and how they performed the task right at the very end, to see any improvement that took place. So, and you'll see also we're asking the learners to do some homework before this first class, even to research some ideas that they can use in their speaking task, just so that they bring in some original ideas and they feel more prepared and confident. And in this case, they brought in ideas about advantages and disadvantages of young people having credit cards. And then try the speaking task the first time, share their ideas with their partners and decide which side of the argument they support. Again, some more useful language for the students to help them. Right, so the next part of the lesson is listening to a model of a discussion on a slightly different topic. This one is about paying students for good grades, and what we used to do we would pre-teach vocabulary they needed to understand the recording in class, but to save time, what we do now is set that as homework before this class, so they've already studied this vocabulary, and that frees up time. And then in the class, you'll see we don't now do listen to the entire recording in class. We don't do all of the activities, comprehension activities in class, but rather start with looking at the listening activities and finish what can't be done in class for homework. So important things like setting the context, and making predictions are done in class. As in this case, we ask the learners to brainstorm in groups possible arguments for and against students being paid for their good grades, and then we can listen to the recording in class and find out if their predictions were correct or not. After that, we set homework where the students can listen to the rest of the recording at home and answer more comprehension questions to make sure they really understand the content of the recording. Oh, and there's the useful language box showing giving students some stems to help them say what they want to say. And then this activity would be done probably in the next lesson after they've had a chance to listen to the recording again and answers more comprehension questions. And this is looking at useful language and skills from the recording that they can use in their own, when they do the task themselves, when they do a similar discussion task themselves. So as quickly as possible in class, draw out the useful language that we want them to be able to use. In this case, acknowledging others' points of view, and then go on to giving the opportunity to repeat the speaking task. Or in this case, a chance to do the speaking task for the first time. So we ask the students to discuss themselves. Should college students be paid for good grades? Using the ideas that they heard in the text and the ideas that they brainstormed themselves in the previous lesson. And we use success criteria in this lesson, so students are clear what constitutes a successful performance of this speaking task. They have to give reasons and examples, they have to agree and disagree, and they have to show that they understand others' points of view when they respond, using the language that we analysed from the model, which is again shown on the slide in the useful language box. And just to make sure that I guess make the task more task-like, make sure that it has a clear outcome. We often ask students to share what they discussed with their class. In this case, it's summarize your discussion and say whether you agreed. So that's hopefully we have found it keeps learners focused on meaning. It keeps them focused on accomplishing the task, and makes them more engaged and interested in what they're doing, knowing that they have to agree or disagree, and then they have to share that with the rest of the class. Okay, so we've looked at some materials showing a summary of this simple task-based learning approach, and I've just made a scheme here which we use to help us when making materials based on the textbook, and that just shows what I showed you just now with the materials. So we start by asking for homework even before the first lesson of a new unit to research ideas for the speaking task, do some language exercises such as that vocabulary task. In class, do that speaking task really early in the unit, then make sure the students get some feedback and a chance to repeat the task before listening to a model of native speakers doing the listening task themselves. For homework, students finish listening to that model, do some more language exercises that will be useful for the task, and in the next lesson, as we did just before, help the students to analyze the speaking skills and language used in the model discussion they listened to for homework, and do the speaking task again using the skills and the language from the model. and ideally a chance for feedback and a chance to repeat. Homework, students can prepare and practice the speaking task a bit more at home, do some more language exercises of useful language for the task before, in the final lesson, doing the speaking task again, get feedback and repeat. There will usually be an assessment, a graded assessment of some kind in that last lesson of the unit as well. For homework, we've been setting, after the final lesson of the unit, we've been setting things like posting a Flipgrid video, if in the case of a presentation task, give the students a chance to put a polished version of the presentation they'd been working on over the 3 lessons online for their classmates to see. And or if it was a discussion task, post their opinion in a forum on the learning management system and comment on their classmates' opinions. So that was the first solution, applying lessons from the online learning experience. The second thing that we tried was came from a review of Barry O'Sullivan's paper on comprehensive learning system. So we looked at how could we make sure that we integrate learning outcomes, assessment and delivery better in this course, and we did that by simplifying the number of learner outcomes and adding success criteria to the syllabus for each of the outcomes, and making sure that that was integrated into the actual delivery of the course through a range of different assessments in lesson, like self-assessment, peer assessment, teacher feedback. And by doing this, we felt we could make the link between outcomes, delivery and assessment stronger, as recommended by Professor O'Sullivan. Make learning more visible for the learners. You can see what they're doing and why and where they're going, what they need to do to improve. And by doing that, hopefully increase learners' sense of progress. And here are some more examples of materials that we made to supplement the textbook. So we always have a review and reflection part of the lesson. It's one example. This one is just to tie up what's been learned in the lesson, get the students to remember what they studied. And then this one is an assessment, self-assessment or reflection, using the learning outcomes and success criteria from the syllabus in the lesson. So students here, they assess themselves from 1 to 3, how well they can now discuss whether young people have credit cards, listen for opinions, acknowledge others' points of view, discuss whether students should be paid for good grades. And this is something that they discuss with each other, and they decide what they discuss what they need to do to improve as well, to make sure that they're looking forward at how they, not only what they can do well now, but what they need to do to get better. Well, so how did that all go? Let's look at the findings. So we collected some feedback through student questionnaires. Actually, we used the usual questionnaires that students do at the end of each semester, feedback questionnaires. Quite informally spoke to teachers, sent chat messages to teachers to find out how they felt, and carried out a few lesson observations to see how the new materials went down with students. So the results seem to confirm that the new approach meant purposes of activities were clearer, especially the teachers' feedback seemed to indicate that they found the lessons much more easy to use. Before it used to be hard work getting through a lesson. Now they found it much simpler. There was more chances for real-life communication feedback. In the lesson observations, it was seen that there was more time for speaking, doing the actual task, more time to repeat the tasks several times in some cases, and the teacher, lots more chances for teachers to give feedback after each task. Students certainly seemed more challenged in this new approach. They enjoy watching students doing tasks. They enjoy it, but they also find it hard work and challenging. Keeping talking in English, communicating that message. Classroom atmosphere was better because that's, as I said, it's much more enjoyable to be doing a task, discussing your ideas, sharing your ideas, solving a problem together, rather than doing language activities or long listening activities. And students seemed more actively involved in their own learning, which was very pleasantly surprising. I thought that students wouldn't like the self-assessment checklists, for example, that I showed you, but they really engaged with it, and you could see that they were really interested in their learning and what they had learned and what they could do to improve. So that was a pleasant surprise. Though possibly for the lower level learners, it needs to be simplified a bit more, and also we need to be careful not to do too much assessment in the class, because that you can lose a bit of the engagement by doing that. Okay, so just a summary of the findings that I mentioned there in the form of memes here. So as I said, the students in their feedback, they said they enjoyed sharing ideas with classmates. So that seems to support this idea of spending more time on tasks, simplifying the lesson. One student made a very interesting comment that they had to dig deep to reformulate what I wanted to say, which is really what we wanted them to do. I was surprised that a student came up with that. I feel that is the time when students are really learning, is when they're trying to say something they want to say in English. They can't quite find the right words, so they need to make some effort. They need to find the right words. They need to say again what they want to say, maybe with support from their classmates or support from the teacher. And I think in that moment, that's when the students are really learning the most. Of course, as I said, there was more opportunity for task repetition and feedback that was observed in lesson observations. Students really engaged with assessments, surprisingly. Another comment was that regarding homework, there was a lot of comments from students in the student feedback questionnaire that they found the homework useful, and I think that was because we really signposted better that if it was a language exercise, we really signposted that this is going to help you to do the task next week. So they understood the value of the homework, and they then found it useful when they were doing the task, and they found it useful when they were doing the task. And there was also more interesting homework we introduced, such as preparing your ideas more before the lesson, so you have some ideas in the lesson to use, and the homework I showed you for practicing outside the classroom after the lesson by making a video or by posting in a forum. Students seem to really enjoy that as well. And as I said, teachers seemed very happy that the lessons were simpler and easier to teach. It was just much easier to get from A to B in the lesson, and easier to understand what you were doing and why. So conclusions to finish. Very, very briefly, there was the problems were not enough challenge because not enough chance for speaking and communicating in class, and not enough sense of progress for students. We took two approaches to solve these problems, moved most receptive skills and language work to homework, and took a simpler task-based learning approach in the bricks and mortar classroom, and integrated learning outcomes and success rate from the syllabus into a range of assessments. And yeah, it was the online experience which created this motivation to take a much simpler approach, and it allowed us to bring out the original task-based learning intention of the syllabus, and give more opportunity for spoken communication and feedback, which resulted in more challenge through coping with real-life communication, and more time in the lesson to do a variety of assessments aligned to more realistic outcomes and success criteria from the syllabus, taking the comprehensive learning systems approach. And finally, the homework seemed to really empower learners, especially the ones that worked hard and did the homework, which was more than the majority of students, to be honest with you. So it seems to be a successful approach that we're going to continue with, and I would recommend for you too, if you're going to when you're planning a program, to try taking that simpler approach, so that the original context appropriate theory of learning that you're using, possibly task-based learning, comes out more, gives students more chance to cope with real-life communication, do the assessments, and make sure that those assessments are realistic and aligned to the ones that are in the syllabus. So I hope that's useful for everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Please get in touch if you have any questions.